Hello, Malcolm Brady from Dublin City University here. I'm going to talk to you today about resources, competencies and capabilities. Um, these are things the firm owns, and it's from its internal resources, its internal capabilities that the firm will generate and a competitive advantage. And not external factors, but internal factors. So this is part of the internal analysis section of our PACE framework, purpose, analysis, choice, and execution. So we're in the analysis stage, the internal analysis stage, and we're looking at what the firm owns or what the firm has, its resources, its capabilities, its competencies. So you can see here on this slide, two of the original writers on this in this area, Jay Barney and Birger Wernerfeld. And the resources are essentially three sets of assets or three sets of capital owned by the firm. It's physical assets, all its plant, its machinery, its locations and so on, its premises, its buildings. All of these are physical assets, its equipment. Also, it's human capital, the people within the organization, not that it owns those, but they're within the organization. So all the capabilities, the competencies of the people, what people can do, their skills and what they can achieve for the organization. And then there's the organizational capital, which is really to do with people interacting together with the technology of the organization, producing something new. So this could be the product range, the brands, the organizational culture, the skill sets, the management style, all of these things within the organization could be broadly regarded as organizational level capital. So three kind of different things here under the heading resources. If we look at Barney's quote, essentially it's everything within the organization. He lists assets, capabilities, organizational processes, firm attributes, knowledge, information, anything controlled by the firm or within the firm that enables the firm to conceive of and implement strategies that improve its efficiency and effectiveness. So it's whatever internally it can do or it has that it can use to generate strategy and achieve competitive advantage. Broadly speaking, this is the resource-based view of the firm. Basically, all of this is within the resource-based view of the firm, which states that the firm gains advantage through its resources as opposed to through external factors such as its market position or its product, its consumer relations, things that are external to the firm. Here we're saying actually what the firm creates its advantage from what's within the firm. So we can see the Wernerfeld quotation there. He talks about those tangible and intangible assets which are tied semi-permanently to the firm. So the assets, he identifies them as tangible. The physical assets, for example, mentioned already, would be largely tangible, but the intangible ones, the brand, the culture of the organization, the management style or management skill, all of these things, operational skills, internal competencies or things people can do, all of these are intangible, hard to define, as we'll see. They're also tied semi-permanently to the firm. So they're within the firm while people work with the firm and so on, but they can be sold, as in terms of physical assets, can be sold off, but people can also leave the organization and go elsewhere. So they're not tied permanently. They're permanently for the duration that they're there, which can be a long time, but people can leave. People are free to leave. So the assets can walk. Okay, so that's important to know. Second slide here on resources are, again, coming from Barney mostly. And it starts with the position that there's a heterogeneity of firm resources. Basically, that's a big word to say that firm resources are different for different firms. They're not all the same. Each firm has a different set of resources. But it's interesting, that word is interesting because much of economic theory assumes homogeneity of firm resources, that information is available and resources are available out there in the market and can be bought by firms or obtained by firms, and therefore after a time they in a sense all become the same, or they can deliver the same kind of thing, and there's not much room for heterogeneity or difference among firms. They're essentially, in a perfect competition world, they're all firms have access to the same set of resources and become similar over time. So the heterogeneity of resources allows a role for management to select those resources and make use of those resources. So again, in the resource-based view or in management theory generally, there is a role for managers, whereas in economic theory, economists don't tend to emphasize a role for managers within economic theory. So it's a move from perfect competition. Now, Barney identifies 4 characteristics of resources. There's 5 here, but I'll come to that. So you'll see valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable. Sometimes the acronym VRIN is used. And sometimes you'll see the acronym VRIO, or valuable, rare, inimitable, and organization. So he produced 2 sets of acronyms, just slightly confusing. The VRIN one is probably the one that's more commonly used. So he's essentially saying that resources are valuable and they're rare. We're not really overly concerned about them. We're not going to make a big deal of them if they're not valuable, if they don't provide some value to the firm or indeed ultimately to the customer. And again, if they're not rare, everybody has them. We're back to homogeneous firms there. So if they're not rare, they don't differentiate the firm either. So it's important from the point of view of the resource-based firm, it's important that the resources are valuable and rare or scarce. And that gives this efficiency advantage, this Ricardian rent, as it's sometimes referred to from David Ricardo, where it's a relative gain. You have a relative advantage over competitors because your resource set is better than theirs and is more efficient than theirs, or produces better products than theirs, relatively speaking. So it's a relative gain, not an absolute gain. It's not a monopoly type gain, which you could argue is an absolute gain. It's a relative gain. And it's important to recognize that. So the resource-based view of the firm is based on a relative advantage over other firms, as opposed to a monopolistic type advantage over other firms. So both of those are how you appropriate your resources. And then inimitability and non-substitutability, or in other words, inimitable being difficult to imitate, difficult to copy. Non-substitutable means that it's difficult to find an equivalent set of resources that do the same thing. They're not easily substituted. So both of those things lead to the resources being durable or sustainable over time, that they provide this sustainable advantage. So valuable and rare provide a competitive advantage, and inimitability and non-substitutable means that it isn't competed away. It isn't. It sustains, or it's durable. His final. It's not really a characteristic of resources, but his final point, his final part of his acronym organization, just means that these resources don't achieve advantage all by themselves. The firm must organize to get competitive advantage from its valuable, rare, inimitable, and non-substitutable resources. A final word on inimitability. You'll see there's a couple of ways in which a firm resources could be inimitable or difficult to imitate. First of all, if they're unique, they're difficult to imitate because no one else has them. So if you have a particular location or a particular supplier, and no one else can get that supplier or that particular component. If you have a monopoly over the component, well, those over obtaining the component, well, that's a unique type of resource. Path dependency just means that in order to get to the same point as a particular organization, other firms would have to follow the same kind of path. And that can be difficult to almost impossible, in fact, to follow the same path as another organization. So that can make it very difficult to compete with them. For example, my university, Dublin City University, finds it difficult to compete with Trinity College Dublin, because Trinity College has been in place for several hundred years, and it has a whole history built up that is part of its competitive advantage. And we're a new young university. We can't compete directly with that kind of legacy. So they have a unique path that is just impossible for us to follow. So we have to find other ways around. Causal ambiguity is just saying that actually firms are complex systems, and complex systems we know, within complex systems we know it's very difficult to discern cause and effect, because it's hard to know what causes what, because there's multiple factors involved. So causal ambiguity just tells us that it's difficult to know what's causing, let's say, your competitive advantage, what's causing this resource set to be so good in the marketplace. And firms themselves often don't know why they're successful. They know they are successful, but they can find it difficult to pin down exactly why they're so good. It's to do with their technology, to do with their products, to do with their style, to do with their culture, but it could be to do with an integrated mix of all of those. And they might themselves be clear on exactly what it is, but they know it works. So obviously very difficult for other firms outside then to actually be able to work out how to compete, because how to mimic them when they themselves don't know exactly what it is they do correct, but they know it's right. And then social complexity is just similar really to that last point, is that firms are made up of lots of different people, all interacting socially. And in order to achieve the same advantage as a competitor firm, you may have to replicate the whole social fabric, which is impossible to do. You sometimes see acquisitions, sorry, not acquisitions, but people or firms poaching not just a person from another organization, but a whole team, say a research team, one pharmaceutical company, say poaching the whole research team of another pharmaceutical company, because it's the social connections between the group that are important, not just a single person. So you need the team, not just an individual. So that social complexity can be difficult to replicate unless you actually poach the entire team. Difficult to create otherwise. And so they're the elements of inimitability. All of that is making it difficult to compete against organizations where their advantage is based on their resource set. Related to this is this notion of competency, which is really a skill, an advantage based on people skills linked with technology, so people's use of technology. And that's labeled core competency. And the big question about the question often asked is, how do you get 6 Hondas into a garage? Well, the answer is that you get the Honda car in, but also you get the Honda motorbike, the Honda lawnmower, the Honda outboard motor, the Honda leaf blower, and the Honda generator, let's say. Okay, so 6 Hondas. And we're saying there, well, okay, what's the common denominator there? And the common denominator is the small engine. That Honda's competency is in producing small engines. Arguably, a car is not that small, but you can see all the other 5 products are small engines, and they leveraged or built on that competency in producing the car and the good quality engine in the car. So essentially, that's what one of their competencies is: making and designing and building small, efficient engines. And they can put them in, they can wrap those engines with all sorts of metal and cabling and so on to produce these different kinds of products. So you can see it's a basis for diversifying as well. The competency concept came from looking at diversified firms and wondering what it is about certain firms like Honda and Canon that allowed them to diversify successfully into very different marketplaces. And the researchers identified this competency as the common denominator. So, excuse me. So the definition from Prahalad and Hamill, their paper in the 1990 Harvard Business Review is a very popular paper. The definition is the collective learning of the organization. It's how to differentiate diverse production skills and integrate multiple streams of technology. So it's that mixture or coordination of people skills, production skills of people, and multiple streams of technology. So we mentioned the engine. Canon is one of their other examples, and they mentioned there that their competency is in optical work and micro design. And those 2 skills allowed Canon use their competencies that they developed in the camera market to move into the photocopier market and then the laser printer market, because both of those 2 products are based on optical skills and microelectronics. So it's what a company does especially well. And because it's a competency or a skill-based advantage, it improves with use. You get better at using it, or as you use it, you get better. We talked already about the experience effect. So this is essentially building on an experience effect. But on the other hand, it also dies if misused or unused. So it'll deteriorate if you don't use it. So you must keep it up, like playing the piano. You have to keep going at it, or learning a language. You can't let it, if you don't use it for a couple of months or a couple of years, it's very difficult to get it back, or you have to work hard. So they talk about cultivating a competency that's difficult to imitate and adds benefit to the customer. So this is this inimitability, or this value that we had already in Barney's acronym or set of characteristics of resources. And the added one there is it allows access to many different markets. That allows you diversify your company based on your competency. And then their final point is never outsource. Obviously, if you outsource it, you're not using it. Somebody else then is building up the competency, and not yourselves. So Schwinn, the bicycle manufacturer in the US, famously outsourced its competency in making bicycles to a Chinese firm, which in turn developed that competency, and that became Giant, the current bicycle manufacturer Giant, and Schwinn dwindled. Its competency was outsourced, and that means you run a huge risk then of losing your competency. And then finally, an example on competency, 3M. This is from their website. And they, I mean, you might think of, and often when we think of competency, we sort of fall back on what the firm does or what it produces. So you might say its competency is producing post-it notes. Well, that's not really the essence of what they do. That's one of their products. So they've refined it and identified their actual competency as applying coatings to backings. And this is very insightful because this allows you to produce all sorts of products, not just post-it notes. So coatings can be adhesives, abrasives, nanoparticles, medicines, optical patterns that are imprinted. All of these are coatings, thin films put on something, put on a backing, and the backing can be woven fabrics, non-woven fabrics, paper, cloth, plastic, metal. So the post-it note obviously is a paper backing, and the coating is a glue that's semi-permanent that holds but is removable, or you can remove the item. So a unique product, coating and backing, but 3M have produced other ones as well that operate on those two elements, coatings and backings. And the ability to modify the shape and pattern of the surface coatings to alter the fundamental behavior of the product. That's really their extra bit as well. So they provide something unique. The semi-permanent glue is a unique feature, and that they found a very useful use for it in the post-it note. Obviously involves highly precise manufacturing and requires broad know-how in adjacent technologies. So they're not saying it's just simply to do with coatings and backings. There are other things involved, but that's the essence of it. And I think it's a very good example, as I say, taken from 3M website of competency. The final point I'm going to leave you with is the notion of dynamic capabilities, which is not just what you're currently able to do, like applying coatings to backings, but the ability to generate new kinds of ways of competing internally. So seizing ways of seizing opportunity, ways of sensing opportunities, and then seizing the opportunities and transforming the organization. These are often given as three of the major dynamic capabilities, and it's a sort of second phase of the competency. So it's not just what you can currently do, but the ability to generate new competencies into the future. So it's known as capabilities, or dynamic capabilities theory. And the three theories, resource-based view, competency-based view, dynamic capabilities, are all broadly under this heading of the resource-based view of the firm, which essentially says the firm gains its advantage from within, from its capabilities, from what it owns or what it has within, and not simply just from its position in the marketplace outside or external advantages. Okay, thank you for listening. I'll finish at this point. Thank you.